Welcome to today's deep dive. So, we are taking a look at a pretty massive stack of industry articles today, along with this really incredible essay by a veteran instructor named Caroline Berger de Fémynie. And we're using all of this to explore a huge shift in the wellness world.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that has the whole fitness community talking right now.
Right. So the topic on the table is the recent acquisition of the Gyrotonic organization by Merrithew. And just for context, Merrithew is the parent company of Stott Pilates.
Which is a massive deal in that space.
Oh, absolutely. But our mission today is not to give you, a corporate financial breakdown or talk about market share or anything like that.
Thank goodness, because that is not my area of expertise.
Exactly. I mean, we're going to skip the spreadsheets. We are using this acquisition and really heavily leaning on Caroline's insights to look at the very philosophy of human movement, like what it actually takes to make a human body function optimally.
Right, getting into the actual mechanics and the biology of it.
Exactly. And to get us in the right headspace for this, I want you to think about your own workout routine for a second. Imagine you walk into your local gym and you find out that your incredibly strict, super disciplined weightlifting coach.
The one who's always yelling at you about your form.
Yes, that exact coach. Imagine finding out that person and your free-flowing, totally expressive dance instructor just decided to open a brand new studio together.
That sounds like a complete disaster waiting to happen.
Right. On paper, it sounds like an absolute clash of cultures. You've got the person telling you to keep your spine perfectly rigid, teaming up with the person telling you to, let the music move your spirit and just flow.
It feels like a recipe for a very confusing, probably very stressful workout.
Yeah, it really does seem like they are going to be stepping on each other's toes, both literally and philosophically.
And honestly, when Merrithew announced they were acquiring Gyrotonic, that was kind of the general reaction across the entire fitness industry.
People were confused.
Oh, completely. People were immediately analyzing the international business strategy, debating whether these two totally distinct movement methodologies could even coexist.
Right, without cannibalizing each other's audiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was seen as this massive seismic shift in rehabilitation and movement education, like two rival families suddenly getting married.
But Caroline's reaction, which she wrote about in her essay, was just entirely different. And we should mention, she's the founder of Studio Pilates Paris.
Yeah, she's not just an observer. She's been teaching Stott Pilates for over 25 years.
And Gyrotonic for over 15 years.
Right. So when she heard the news about the acquisition, she didn't write some panicked think piece on corporate synergy. She just smiled.
Just smiled, which is amazing.
Because for her, these two methods have been living side by side in her daily life under the exact same roof of her own studio for over a decade and a half.
So it wasn't news to her body.
Not at all. This corporate merger just officializes something she has literally observed in her students' bodies for a very long time. In her eyes, these two methods have just always been made for each other.
Okay, let's unpack this because I really want to figure out how that is possible. To someone who has maybe only seen like a 10-second Instagram clip of these workouts, or maybe taken one boutique fitness class, Pilates and Gyrotonic look and feel like they are from entirely different planets.
Visually, they are strikingly different.
Right. So to understand why Caroline views them as soulmates, we really need to define the distinct, I guess you'd call them personalities, of these two disciplines.
I like that word, personalities.
Yeah.
So looking through Caroline's lens, Stott Pilates is essentially the builder.
The builder, okay.
Yeah. Over her 25 years of teaching, she has used it to help, professional dancers, elite athletes, pregnant women, people in rehab for chronic pain. And she describes Stott Pilates as the foundation of a house.
Meaning it's all about structure.
Highly structured, incredibly organized, and deeply, deeply analytical. Pilates really teaches both the instructor and the student to observe the absolute minutiae of human movement.
It sounds exactly like the strict weightlifting coach from our analogy earlier.
Very much so. It's all about observing complex neurological, muscular, and biomechanical compensations. In fact, Caroline points to the 6 fundamental principles of Stott Pilates to show just how rigid this structure actually is.
What are those principles?
So they are breathing, pelvic placement, rib cage placement.
Minute, rib cage placement. You have to think about where your rib cage is.
Oh, yeah, every single detail matters. So breathing, pelvic placement, rib cage placement, scapular stabilization, head and cervical alignment, and finally, optimal lower limb organization.
Okay, hold on. Let's translate some of that because it sounds a little bit like we're just reading from an anatomy textbook right now.
Fair enough.
If I'm just, lying on a mat in a studio, What does scapular stabilization actually mean for me in that moment?
Okay, so scapular stabilization essentially means teaching your back muscles to act like literal anchors for your shoulder blades.
So locking them down.
Right. So when you lift your arms, or even just lift a heavy box in your real life, your shoulders don't automatically hike up to your ears and tense up your entire neck. You are actively locking the structure into a safe, optimal position.
Got it. And what was the last one? Optimal lower limb organization.
Yeah, that's basically just making sure that when you bend your knee, it tracks perfectly over your toes rather than caving inward and putting a ton of weird stress on the joint.
Okay, so it's a highly specific architectural blueprint for the human body. Every single joint, every single breath has an assigned mathematically correct position.
Exactly. When Caroline teaches on Pilates equipment, she says she feels like she's physically building a house. Every single exercise reinforces that strict structure.
Every little micro correction.
Yes, every micro-correction improves alignment.
Yeah.
It gives the body stability, efficiency, and total control. You are basically creating a coherent framework where your nervous system and your muscular system communicate perfectly to prevent injury.
Okay, I think I have a good picture of the builder.
Hmm.
But if Pilates is the builder constructing this solid, rigid, what was gyrotonic?
Well, if Pilates builds the house, Caroline says gyrotonic opens windows.
Opens the windows. Wow. So we are moving from pure structure to just pure air.
That captures the sensation perfectly, yeah.
Yeah.
Where Pilates is all about strict structure and perfect alignment, gyrotonic is about continuous, circular, spiraling trajectories.
Spirals. Okay, that's totally different than locking your shoulders down.
Completely different. In Pilates, you might do a set of precise repetitions, you hold a position, you focus on the burn, and then you stop. In gyrotonic, movement is perpetual.
He just keeps going.
Right. The body stops functioning in these isolated segments and instead finds this natural, continuous flow. Even the breathing is different. The breathing never interrupts the motion. It completely accompanies it. Every single gesture just naturally feeds into the next one.
So what does that look like in practice?
Picture sitting on a stool or a bench, sweeping your arms in these wide, undulating figure eights, and just moving your spine in literal waves.
It sounds beautiful, honestly, but maintaining that kind of physical control isn't just a mental exercise. I mean, both of these methods rely on some incredibly complex machinery to force your body into these positions, right?
Oh, absolutely. The equipment is a massive part of the identity of both methods.
Let's look at the actual equipment Caroline highlights in her article. Because on the Pilates side, she mentions the Reformer and the Cadillac.
Yeah.
And they visually look exactly like their philosophy.
They really do.
I mean, the Reformer is essentially a sliding carriage on a frame attached to these heavy springs that resist and assist your movement in very straight linear tracks.
It looks like an engineering tool.
Yeah.
It really does. Caroline notes the Reformer is specifically for movement organization, while the Cadillac,
Which looks medieval, by the way.
it does. It's like a raised bed with this big metal frame overhead, full of bars and springs and straps. She says the Cadillac provides support and precision. They're very linear, very stabilizing machines.
But then you cross the studio over to the gyrotonic side, and the machinery just changes entirely. She talks about the pulley tower, which uses weights and cables to allow for this three-dimensional circular movement.
Right, and the bench, which she associates entirely with spirals.
The visual difference completely mirrors the physical intent. You have linear tracks and heavy metal springs on one side versus rotational discs and free-flowing pulleys on the other.
Exactly.
But wait, let me jump in here. If I'm on a Reformer, actively locking my shoulders down to create this strict stability, and then 10 minutes later I go to a pulley tower to swirl my spine around in endless mobility, aren't these methods fundamentally at war with each other?
It definitely seems like they would be.
Right. If my nervous system is literally learning to lock down and brace in Pilates, won't it just instinctively fight the fluidity of gyrotonic?
And that right there is the core paradox that makes Caroline's perspective so incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
They aren't fighting for control of the body. They're just two different languages telling the exact same story.
Two different languages.
Yeah. The biological truth of the matter is that one actually requires the other.
So stability and mobility don't cancel each other out.
No, not at all. True mobility is literally impossible without stability. And on the flip side, rigid stability without mobility is just stiffness.
It's just being totally locked up.
Exactly. Let's think of it like a car. Stott Pilates is tightening the bolts on the chassis, making sure the frame is perfectly aligned and structurally totally sound.
Okay.
And then gyrotonic is lubricating the axle so the wheels can actually spin freely in any direction. If your chassis is loose and just falling apart, it honestly doesn't matter how well your wheels spin.
Because the car is going to crash either way.
Exactly. You have to have the strong frame to support the spinning wheels.
That makes so much sense.
And Caroline sees this play out as a literal feedback loop in her studio every single day.
How so? Like with her cross-training students.
Yeah. So when a student with a really strong Stott Pilates background starts learning gyrotonic, they progress significantly faster than a beginner just coming off the street.
Really? Even though the movements are so different.
Because their postural organization is already locked in, their breathing is efficient, because they have that internal structural integrity, that strong chassis we talked about built by Pilates, they actually feel secure enough to let go.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah. They aren't afraid to fully explore the endless fluidity and spirals of gyrotonic because their nervous system inherently knows it won't collapse.
That is so interesting. Because if you don't trust your foundation, you're going to hold your breath and tense up the moment you try to do a spiraling continuous movement. You'll just panic, overcompensate, and probably pull a muscle.
You'll guard your body. That's exactly what happens. But because the Pilates student is already so secure, they can throw the windows wide open, to use Caroline's phrase.
I love that.
And the feedback loop actually goes the other way, too.
What happens when they go back?
When dedicated gyrotonic students go back to take a Pilates session, they bring an entirely new level of awareness to the mat. They return to that rigid structure with much, much richer spinal mobility.
But what does that actually look like during a strict Pilates workout? Do they just stretch further on the reformer?
It's way deeper than just stretching. Their internal bodily perception is completely heightened. Caroline notes that gyrotonic students have a vastly increased capacity to actually feel and integrate microcorrections.
Because they're used to feeling everything.
Right. Because their nervous system is so used to sensing movement through this massive sweeping range of motion, they are just much more attuned to the tiny millimeter adjustments required in Pilates. Gyrotonic breathes life and awareness into the strict structure.
It's the strict weightlifter and the expressive dancer from our gym analogy, realizing they actually make the perfect team.
Exactly. Which leads perfectly into a really specific example Caroline gives in our article. She talks a lot about working with professional dancers.
Oh, dancers are the ultimate synthesis of this concept.
They really are.
Because when you watch a professional dancer leap across a stage, it looks like pure magic. I mean, they are spinning, contorting, moving with complete uninhibited freedom. Visually, it looks like pure gyrotonic.
Pure expression.
Right. But to leap 3 feet into the air and land perfectly silently on one single foot without shattering an ankle joint, that requires absolute microscopic structural control.
Which is pure Pilates. Caroline explicitly says that for dancers, Pilates gives them the precise strength and stability to control the movement, while gyrotonic gives them the freedom and mobility to express it.
Control and expression.
You cannot have the expression without the control. If you try, you get injured. And the control is ultimately useless if you have nothing to express with it.
It's just force with no purpose.
Exactly. Pilates builds the foundational force, and gyrotonic enriches the mobility of that force.
There is a detail in the article that I want to push back on just a little bit, though.
Okay, what's that?
Caroline claims that a truly complete movement studio-like, in her ideal world, needs all the Stott Pilates equipment and all the gyrotonic equipment. She lists this enormous inventory.
She does list a lot of gear.
Yeah, she lists the reformer, the Cadillac, the Pilates chair, the barrels, the pulley tower, the bench, the jumping stretching board, and the gyrotoner.
It's a full house.
My immediate reaction reading that was, is she just trying to justify hoarding incredibly expensive boutique fitness gear? Because that sounds like a very crowded, very expensive room. Is it just brand loyalty, or do I actually need all these different machines to be healthy?
It's a fair question. But if we really look at the mechanics of these machines, it's definitely not about hoarding gear. Each piece of machinery isolates a totally specific neurological or biomechanical challenge. They essentially all ask the body a different question.
Okay, break that down for me. If I already have a reformer doing the linear spring work, why do I need a Pilates chair? What question is the chair asking?
Good question. So the Pilates chair isn't just a place to sit down. It has this heavy spring-loaded pedal that you press down on, often while standing or balancing on top of the actual chair.
That sounds precarious.
It is. If you press that pedal down with just one arm or one leg, your core has to work in absolute overdrive just to keep your body from physically tilting over. The chair is specifically designed to challenge force and equilibrium. It essentially asks your nervous system, can you stay stable while pushing against an asymmetrical force?
Oh, I see. It's totally different than lying flat on a carriage. And what about the barrels? They just look like padded half-cylinders sitting on the floor.
They do, but the barrels are uniquely shaped to tell the story of spinal mobility in a very safe way. By draping your body over the curve, you are allowing your spine to experience supported flexion and extension.
So it's stretching the front and back of the body safely.
Exactly. So the chair fights for balance, and the barrel supports the spine.
Okay, so what about the gyrotonic equipment she listed, like the jumping stretching board?
So the jumping stretching board utilizes gliding tracks and rotational platforms. It is entirely about exploring the elasticity of the fascia and the joints.
Fascia being the connective tissue.
Right. And then you have the gyrotoner, which looks almost like a set of independent weighted steering wheels. That machine focuses on the pure, uninterrupted continuity of movement, mostly in the upper body and pelvis.
Okay, I get it now. So the chair isn't doing the same job as the pulley tower. If you only have a reformer, you are really only speaking one dialect of movement.
Exactly. By having all of these tools, you allow the student to explore their body from entirely different but super complementary angles.
Yeah.
You are providing the exact right mechanical environment to solve a specific physical puzzle at a specific moment in time.
And realizing that these machines just solve specific puzzles leads to what might be Caroline's most profound realization in this whole essay.
The erasing of borders.
Yes. She takes this synergy between the equipment and the methods, and she applies it to the fitness and rehabilitation industry as a whole. She completely dismantles this tribalism we see in fitness.
Which is everywhere.
It is. For decades, it's always been yoga versus Pilates or weightlifting versus cardio. It's incredibly territorial. People pick a team and they stick to it.
It's so territorial, and Caroline just exposes the illusion of those boundaries. She points out a fundamental biological truth. The human body does not know these borders.
Our anatomy doesn't read the marketing brochures.
It really doesn't. The nervous system does not recognize the border between Pilates and Gyrotonic. Your fascia doesn't know the name of the brand printed on the side of the wooden bench you're sitting on.
It's just wood and springs to your body.
Right. Those boundaries were entirely created by human disciplines, by marketing departments, and let's be honest, by ego. Biology does not care.
Biology just wants the joint to move through its full range of motion safely.
Exactly. The ultimate takeaway from Caroline's decades of experience is that the specific method you are using matters far less than the capacity of that method to answer a particular physical need.
Which circles us perfectly back to the acquisition that sparked this whole deep dive in the first place.
Right. Merrithew acquiring Gyrotonic.
Right. Because it wasn't just a corporate conglomerate swallowing a smaller brand to eliminate the competition. It is literally two historically distinct movement communities finally dropping the artificial borders.
They're dropping the tribalism.
Exactly. It's the corporate world officially recognizing a biological reality that teachers like Caroline have understood in their studios for years.
It proved that stability and fluidity are collaborators. They aren't enemies. We talked about the concept of a toolbox today. You don't declare undying loyalty to the hammer and then stubbornly refuse to ever touch a screwdriver.
Right. You don't say, I am a hammer person, screwdrivers are my rival philosophy.
That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
You use both of them to build the house, or in this case, to build the strong foundation, and then throw open the windows to let the air in.
Pilates and Gyrotonic provide the perfect equilibrium, structure and expression, control and freedom, providing someone with the strict analytical stability of Pilates right alongside the boundless, continuous fluidity of Gyrotonic equips their nervous system with an extraordinary set of tools to just keep evolving.
It's a complete physical education.
It really is. And that idea of evolution brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We've spent this entire time talking about the human body, the spine, and physical machinery. But I want you to apply Caroline's realization about erasing borders to the rest of your life.
Take it out of the gym.
Exactly. Because if our nervous systems don't actually recognize the artificial borders we draw between fitness routines, what other borders in your life are completely made up?
Oh, that's a good question.
We do this to our own personalities constantly. We love to label ourselves to feel secure. We say things like, I'm a highly analytical person, I don't do art, or I'm the creative one, I can't handle spreadsheets. We tell ourselves, I'm a strict, disciplined planner, or I'm just totally spontaneous.
We put ourselves in boxes.
We totally do. But if perfect physical movement literally requires both strict structural discipline, A and D, completely free-flowing expression to work on it, maybe your mind requires the exact same pairing. So what opposing method or personality trait in your own life, the one you've been actively avoiding because it's not quote unquote you, is actually the exact missing puzzle piece you've been looking for. Something to think about the next time you find yourself guarding a boundary that biology never built. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.